and I'm joined by Laverne on our Zoom controls, as well as my colleague Elise, who will be helping with Q&A, and our intern Allie. As many of you know, AARP is all about connecting Minnesotans with trusted and relevant information, as well as providing opportunities to interact and have fun. We believe that severe weather is important because we know severe weather can happen at any time. And knowing what to do in an emergency is an important part of being prepared. And that knowledge might make all the difference when seconds count. So, and I'm sure you will all agree, this weather has been exceptionally unusual. Before we get started, I want to run through an important logistical item.
Patty, I think you're muted.
The chat function, which is at the bottom middle of your screen, okay? And we will have opportunities throughout the presentation to ask our guest speaker. All right, so next, if there aren't any more questions, I would like to introduce our guest speaker. Karma Kumlin-Diers is an emergency management coordinator for Ramsey County Emergency Management and Homeland Security. For the last 15 years, she has served as the county's natural hazards planner. She has also taught severe weather storm spotters for 21 years. She serves on the National Weather Service Storm Board for the Twin Cities, and she helps coordinate information, education, and warning protocols. I must add that severe weather safety is very personal to her. When she was 10 years old, on her first time home alone at night, an unwarned EF5 tornado hit and destroyed her home with her in the basement. She then knew that she wanted to not only help others who were affected by disasters, but also teach people how to stay safe. She lives in the Twin Cities with her 9-year-old twins, 2 fussy cats, and 1 enormous fluffy dog. So welcome, Karma, and take it away.
Thank you. And hopefully that enormous fluffy dog, who basically has 2 modes, which is snoring or barking, will stay in snoring mode for us throughout this, as we are still working from home for the most part. All right, so I'm going to switch over to share my screen, which will have our presentation. Hopefully, will show up any second. Patty, you want to let me know when it's up?
Yes, it is up, Karma.
Perfect. All right. So if you're not familiar with this presentation method, it's called Prezi, and there's a little bit of movement that will occur. So just be aware. I try to keep it at a minimum though. So basically, we are going to be covering the basics of severe weather preparedness. And for me, that includes some awareness. And I'll pull up the objectives here, maybe. There we go. Because understanding a little bit about how storms form and how they work is actually very useful for knowing if you are in danger or not. Is this, scary looking cloud in front of me something that, I should run to the basement because of? Or am I really safe? As well as where in the storm you will find certain hazards. And that can help you as well with making decisions about your safety. And so we'll also talk about those dangerous versus scary looking clouds and the various different hazards that severe summertime or warm weather storms, also known as convective storms, can bring to us here in Minnesota. And then we will end the presentation by going through all the things that you can do and all the options that you have for being safe when severe weather is coming your way, regardless of your circumstance at that time. Do let me know if at any point you see a problem with the presentation. What I see may not be what you see, but we've tested it, so we should be good to. The most important thing that we're going to be covering today is things that really can save lives. As much as information, et cetera, is useful, and I want you to be prepared, really the information that we can provide here can be directly responsible for saving your life or the lives of other people that you love. So we also will make this available to you as well as some other information that you can both review and share with others. So when we're talking about facing severe weather as a Minnesotan, there's really 3 steps that I want you to look at. So one is to simply be aware of what the danger is, and not only as a general thing, just understand what severe storms can bring, but also stay aware of the weather so that you have some information ahead of time that severe weather is coming to you and you can be that much more prepared. And I'll cover how to get warnings. I'll cover where to find good forecast information, etc. We'll talk a little bit about where you can go for safety. So where within whatever building that you're in, or even when you're outside, can provide some safe protection. And then making sure that you have with you, wherever you are, things that you will need to get through that period. So first, we're going to talk about how we put together a storm. And there's actually, it's kind of a lot of 3s today, but 3 main ingredients necessary for a storm. And with the information about these, if you look at a forecast and you see these starting to come together, it's actually fairly easy for the layperson to be able to say, you know what, I think we might have some storms today. And amazingly enough, severe storm prediction is very different from the predictions we see on a regular basis. Whether it will rain today, how cold it will be, etc. Those are really, fallible in many occasions. But because severe storms require some very specific ingredients, if we see those, we know we have a fairly high chance of severe weather. And severe storm prediction has gotten to the point where they can even up to 8 days in advance say that this particular area of Minnesota is going to get some severe weather on this particular day, and even know whether or not that weather is going to bring strong gusty winds, hail, or if it'll be a more tornadic storm. Now, of course, they can't predict for you exactly which town and exactly which time, but they can get within a relatively small 4-hour window that we have severe weather likely that day, which if you're planning a family reunion or anything like that is a great way to make sure that you have some backup plans and are more aware of what may come in. So the ingredients that are necessary are moisture, instability in the atmosphere, and some source of lift. Of course, we all remember from kindergarten how a cloud forms. Clouds form by rising warm air that meets colder air and condenses to form a cloud. In order for a cloud of the size of a thunderstorm to form, we need a lot of moisture and we need a lot of warm rising air. Now, these storms typically up here are anywhere between 5 and 20 miles wide for an individual storm, and they can be around 40 to 50,000 feet tall. In other parts of the world, some of these storms are 80,000 feet tall. Storms can contain within them up to 1 billion pounds of water that is floating in the air above your head. So they really are massive structures, and it takes a lot to get them going. But during the summer, we start to see a lot of ground heating and warm air at the surface levels, but the upper atmosphere is still much cooler. So if we have high dew points, and we have a source of lift, such as a front pushing through or excessive amount of day heating, that is that the ground outside is really getting baked by the sun that day. Just like those mirages we see on the road in front of us, that is warm air coming off the surface that is going to be added to the atmosphere. Now, when we're talking about dew points, in particular, we're looking for things that are above 50 degrees. That's enough to have enough moisture to start forming these larger clouds. At 60 degrees, we have a good chance, 60 degrees of dew point, we have a good chance of any of these storms that are created becoming severe. They now have enough energy within them, and they will be able to grow to a certain height, which means that they may be severe that day. No guarantee. And then anytime that we have a dew point above 65 degrees, that means that the storms that form have a good possibility of producing tornadoes. So just with that dew point, we can tell a lot about what kind of weather we're going to have that day. All right. Oops. So now that we have all the ingredients together, here's how we bake this. We have warm air that will be coming off of the surface. And because of a front or simply the nature of warm air to want to rise, it will begin to create what's called an updraft. And this kind of train of warm air is going to go up into the upper levels of the stratosphere, where it will cool and form ice crystals. And of course, cloud. As these ice crystals start to glom together, they become heavier and they begin to fall, and they melt as they go and become rain. This cycle of essentially inhaling warm air and exhaling cold air, cold, wet air, is the engine that creates a storm. We can also see within this, being able to recognize where warm air is rising and cold air is falling out can actually tell us what direction storms are moving as well. Storms have a tendency to have their cold, wet air being pushed out of the storm in front of it. So that's where you'll see all the rain. And of course, we've all stood there and watched a storm coming in, and at some point there's a shift in the wind and we can begin to smell the rain. That's when the downdraft coming out of that storm has reached us. If we are looking at a storm moving away, for the most part, the rain will be on the opposite side of it. And we'll see this area of clear air, very little rain in this section. Now, it's a little different in parts of Minnesota that have a lot of moisture, because this section can get wrapped up a little bit in rain, and we may not be able to see some of the features on the backside of the storm as well. But in general, being able to recognize where the rain is falling in a storm that you have a good view of will help you see what direction it's going and how to stay out of it. So there are actually different things that happen as far as severe weather that affects people on the ground within each section of this storm. If the storm is coming over you, or for some reason you end up in the downdraft or leading portion of the storm, that's where you will see all the heavy rain. That's where you will get the hail, and the hail will increase in size as you get further back within that storm and it gets closer to the updraft, because the updraft is able to hold larger and larger pieces of ice up within the storm for a longer period of time until they get so heavy that it falls down. So hail will always start off little and it will get bigger as it goes. And this is where we'll see our damaging wind gusts, whether they're downburst or large straight line winds. So those will be coming out with the arrival of the storm. Within the back portion of the storm, so you've just gone through all of this horrible wind, giant hailstorms and blinding rain, and you finally come out and you can see blue sky on the horizon. That's the section that produces the tornado. So we do have to watch kind of both ends of the storms as they come through it. Know that if you are for any reason having to go through a storm, whether you're driving or it's coming over your house, that you do need to wait until the storm passes to get out of all of its dangers. And that if you are driving, you might be driving into an area that you cannot see before you get there, and there might be a tornado right there. So we always recommend trying to drive around any storm that is strong, or especially has any kind of severe warning on it. And lightning can, of course, form in any parts of these storms. You won't see it kind of more here for this kind of storm, etc. A storm only needs to be 20,000 feet tall to produce lightning. That's at the point when it becomes a thunderstorm. So even garden variety thunderstorms can produce things that are extremely dangerous. But because they're not considered a severe feature, we're not going to be covering lightning and how it forms within this presentation, but we will talk a little bit about safety. So since lightning isn't severe and it can kill you, what exactly qualifies a storm as severe? So what is used are standards that mean that that storm is actually causing damage in a wide area rather than just a lightning strike over at a certain level. So winds coming out of the storm that are 58 miles per hour or greater. That's a conversion from 60 knots. That's why it's a weird number. At that point, we do start to see patio furniture being blown around, some limbs coming off of trees, potential fence damage, etc. So that's why at that point we're saying, hey, this storm means business, so please be careful with it, and it will get a warning. Hail over an inch in diameter will start denting your roof, your car, damaging crops, and really hurts when it's falling. Of course, these are the baselines. It goes up from here. And of course, anything with a tornado or a funnel is considered severe. So occasionally we'll get flash flood warnings, and that's most often on storms that are producing rain over an inch an hour. That's faster than the ground can generally absorb it. And something called a persistent rotating wall cloud. And I know that's kind of technical, but if you've ever seen a wall cloud and been really concerned about it, if you know how to recognize them, understand that they're actually pretty common and not something to get terribly worried about. Just keep an eye on it. Anytime that you have a wall cloud that hangs out for a long period of time and clearly has some rotation to it, that's when we start to get concerned. So remember, we're going to talk about things that you should be concerned about and show some examples, and things that really just keep an eye on it, but no need to freak out at that point. All right, we've gotten through our first section, and we're going to start covering some scary looking clouds. So storms are famous for having pretty amazing cloud features. Many of those are really ominous looking, but it turns out that most of them are actually not harmful in any way. So what you're looking at here is called Mamatis, and it is a sign of turbulence in the upper areas of this storm. I like to think of it as basically a hernia in the storm. So at this point, and we often see them as a storm is beginning to weaken, the updraft is having a little trouble supporting everything that is put into the upper atmosphere, and things begin to start to pouch out as the storm begins to decay. So you will generally see them, even though they look close, they're actually very high up on the very bottom portion of that large anvil head. And there's no rotation to them. So they are not going to produce any kind of tornado or funnel whatsoever. Really, the purpose of them is to take a picture and send it into your local news station and have that be on the air. So keep an eye on them. Again, that storm can still be dangerous if it's coming towards you. It may have some gusty winds and hail left to drop, but these clouds themselves do not indicate the strength of the storm and do not produce any severe features. They're just cool looking. Scud, which is actually an acronym standing for Stratocumulus Underdeck, which means the base of the storm. So you have these little puffy clouds that are blown around underneath the storm. And anytime you have anything that is not actually attached to the cloud above it, it's just a little accessory item. It's something that you can use to see which way the winds are blowing underneath the storm, but it is not dangerous at all. So as you're looking at things and you see that they're actually not attached and they're maybe moving slightly different than the clouds above them, it's really a detached little poofy cloud that's showing as well how much moisture there is underneath this storm. Shelf clouds are the things that we get the most reports on as far as people thinking that there is a serious danger. And that's because they are extremely ominous looking. They tend to be very large, actually going all the way across the base of a storm. But there's something different with them, despite their ominous look, than what we would see in the tornadic portion of a storm. So because they're very large compared to a very small wall cloud, they're not going to be a wall cloud, not produce a tornado. They have a tendency to be right along the front of the storm with all the rain behind them, rather than being in the backside of a storm where we mostly concerned about tornadoes forming. They have a tendency to have a little bit of rising motion because they are caused almost like a dustbin pushing forward in front of the storm. As it pushes through the rest of the atmosphere, some of that warm rising air gets shoved up into the front of the storm. You have all that cold, wet air pushing out the bottom, and that basically just shapes these clouds in front of it. There's no way to tell if this storm is dangerous or not based on the presence of a wall cloud, or excuse me, a shelf cloud. Even when they look like they're, a giant shark coming to bite us, as long as it is very long, we see the rain behind it, and there's no rotation in any part, then this is a non-dangerous feature. Photographic, but not dangerous. So this is what a wall cloud looks like. It's much smaller than a shelf cloud, which will go, again, horizon to horizon on the storm. Wall clouds are independent, well, not quite independent. They're isolated and they are attached generally in the back side of the storm. So unlike Scud, they're very clearly attached to the storm above them. Unlike the wall cloud, they're isolated, fairly small considering the rest of the size of the storm. And it's a portion of the storm that has begun to rotate faster than anything else. And because of that rotation, just like water going down a drain or being stirred in your coffee cup, that will push cloud downward at that point. And that's why we most often see tornadoes come out of wall clouds. Now you can have a storm that doesn't have a wall cloud and gets a tornado. You can have a storm with a wall cloud and have a tornado come out beyond that wall cloud. But generally when we see a wall cloud, that's the focus area for most likely development of thunderstorms, or sorry, of tornadoes. But within a wall cloud, remember that we really want to see signs of strength. They are very common and not necessarily indicate that the storm is going to produce a tornado. If we see a wall cloud that hangs out for a while, more than 5 minutes, and especially if we see one that begins to rotate on its own rather than just moving with the storm, that is an indication of a much more enhanced chance for a tornado to form. And that at that point, you may actually get a tornado warning on that storm just from that rotating wall cloud. And I'll have a video that shows a little bit of that here and why we go ahead and warn on a wall cloud like that. Okay, so when we're looking at a strong to a severe storm, we probably are looking at a storm that has that big anvil across the top of it, where that rising cloud forming air has hit a layer of atmosphere that prevents it from rising up any further, and it begins to spread out along that layer of atmosphere. These storms will be fairly tall. They will be very solid looking, unlike little wispy clouds that are moving around and being blown around by the atmospheric winds. These things are creating clouds, new clouds so quickly that the wind can't blow it away fast enough. So they're going to have a very crisp look to the clouds along the base. We watch for these bases, the flat area underneath a storm, to be very low. A high-based thunderstorm is not likely to be severe. So again, look for something that looks like it's cotton balls, you know, or cauliflower floating through the air. There's a particular type of storm which has the most frequent high-level severe events, and that's called a supercell. And many people have heard about supercells, and they are possible up in our area. So what is unique about them is that there is so much turbulence and rotation and interaction between a very strong updraft and that downdraft that they begin to spin around one another. And this rotation, this large scale rotation, can actually begin to spin the entire storm. And because it is spinning, but very, very slowly, we can see that it gets a certain kind of look to it, almost like cotton candy that has been spun up, or a towel that's being wrung out. Because of that as well, they can get very, very low, and they narrow at that base. So these are responsible for our largest hail, our strongest wind gusts, and definitely the largest and most dangerous tornadoes. Most often will come out of a supercell. And they have this kind of mothership look. So I do have a video here. Please excuse the soundtrack that's on this. It's from a storm chaser, and they like to be very dramatic. But in this, you'll see a time lapse of a supercell, and you'll be able to see that rotation in it in time lapse. So we can see the rain off behind this. That's the downdraft portion of the storm. This is just that back portion of the storm that has begun to lower. Within that, we see a very small area of wall cloud formation. Again, wall clouds are pretty small. They're more like kind of a boil on the backside of the storm underneath it. And then, of course, we have tornadoes. Tornadoes and funnels are very similar as far as are very close to each other. No, that doesn't make sense. Tornadoes and funnels are obviously the same thing, but the difference between a tornado and a funnel is that a funnel is a rapidly rotating column of air that is coming out of a storm above it, but it hasn't yet touched the ground. And once it does touch the ground, and that is evident by some kind of debris or visually being able to see that it is on the ground, it becomes a tornado. Why do we bother with calling it one thing at one point and a tornado at the other? Because we're still going to warn on it like it's going to become a tornado. But a tornado is a sign that damage is occurring right now. And that's why they will have different kind of things that they say when we have a confirmed tornado, as opposed to a funnel. So, and this is why we warn on them. Both persistent rotating wall clouds as well as funnels can become tornadoes, in fact, very dangerous tornadoes very quickly. And understand that radar, as it goes through, takes a while to move all the way around. And the difference between seeing something that looks like a minor amount of rotation in a storm to having a large tornado already on the ground before that radar sweeps returns and can see that is very quick. So we really appreciate when storm spotters who've been trained how to recognize these can get us information about what's actually occurring and get that warning out to people that much faster. So this is from the 2007 outbreak, or excuse me, 2010 outbreak on June 17th. This includes the outbreak of the Wadena tornado. So this is real time. This is not time lapse. We see a low wall cloud, extremely low. Almost looks like you could reach up and touch it. The rotation is very clear and it's getting fairly tight. But as you see, compared to this farm, and suddenly we have a large tornado on the ground that quickly. So when we're talking about tornado warning, keep in mind that these storms can go from looking dangerous and giving signs of danger to being extremely dangerous very quickly. And at no time should you discount a warning for a tornado. If, and most likely that storm was at that point, no one knew that there was a tornado except for the person who was watching it. And it takes time for them to call it in and for that warning to be issued. So obviously that farm is going to be dealing with that tornado without any warning at all. And that's why we really hope that people can get in the practice of being prepared to know that severe weather is in the area and be ready at a moment's notice to seek shelter. All right, so tornadoes come in all kinds of different sizes and shapes. As rapidly rotating columns of air, they can be completely clear. It's only when they pull cloud down with them or when they start to pull debris up that we are able to actually see that funnel. They can be anything from a few dozen feet wide to 2.6 miles wide, as the El Reno tornado was. They're generally on the ground for about 15 minutes and for about 15 miles, which also tells you how fast they tend to move. They can go at anywhere between 30 and 60 miles per hour and independent in their direction from the storm. So just because the storm is moving this way, they can curve off to a different area, and they actually can change direction as well. So if you're thinking that you see a tornado while you're out driving, but it doesn't look to be coming your way, don't chance it. It could change very significantly or grow in size very rapidly and impact you. And obviously, when we're talking about some of these tornadoes, really within our mind, the scariest thing is looking at some of these very long tracked, very large, very damaging tornadoes. So what's known as an EF5 tornado, a 4R5, can have winds up to 318 miles per hour. We have seen these large tornadoes be on the ground for 2 hours or more and go 300 miles at that kind of strength. So, they kind of write their own rule book. So this is the town of Greensburg, Kansas. And I'd like you to think about this as being your neighborhood in order to understand what these storms can do. Also keep in mind, though, that those EF4 and EF5 are the very big, strongest tornadoes, represent less than 1% of all tornadoes that occur in the United States. Every year, on average, we have about 1,200 tornadoes. Most of them have minimal damage, but that means we do get around 12 of these every year. So this is Greensburg, Kansas, and this is Greensburg, Kansas after an EF5 went through. We have the high school, the local hospital, etc. Every house within this town is raised. The only thing that was left standing was the grain elevator up on the edges of this storm. Luckily, there was enough warning on this storm that, though unfortunately 9 people did die because of the lack of basements in this storm, most people were able to find an appropriate shelter in time. This is what it looks like when one of those storms go through. One of their hallmarks is these broken off trees. Unlike seeing trees that have been toppled, that actually occurs in slightly less severe winds, certainly severe level, but not as strong as this. At this point, the trees don't even have time to topple. We would also see within this tornado path, sod stripped off the ground, asphalt stripped off the road. Unfortunately, in these houses, etc., this house is not even from this location. It's probably from a location several hundred yards down the road. all this debris has been shoved everywhere. And that is why we want you to think about not only getting through the tornado, but getting through the period after, because of the debris and the difficulty potentially with getting rescued as all of the firefighters and rescuers attempt to sift through this, looking for where your basement might be. This, of course, is the famous Joplin tornado. And a reason why I want people to think about whether or not you're really safe in a big, strong building when you're on the upper floors. We generally recommend that you try and get as low as you can before the storm hits, with the purpose of trying to head underground. These storms are survivable in a building above ground, but your chances are fairly slim. Obviously, the hospital is very well built, and we do see a lot of damage on the upper floors, including some areas that have collapsed, and of course, a lot of window damage. So definitely stay away from the windows. But what is interesting to note about this hospital is that the entire hospital had to be raised. They could not just rebuild the top and put in some new windows, because the foundation of the hospital had been shifted 5 inches because of the strength of this storm. And then, of course, when we talk about driving and tornadoes, the fact that they can change direction, that they can change strength very quickly, and also that you really can't tell. A very small tornado can be an F5, a very large tornado like the one that hit North Minneapolis can be relatively mild as far as tornadoes go. Certainly the damage in that area was significant, but houses were fine except for roof damage and any place where a tree toppled over on them. Otherwise, the damage was primarily to garages and fences. But if you're in a car with one of these stronger storms, your car is going to become a piece of debris. And even this semi-axle, as you see, was just bent right around this tree by the strength of these. So staying in your car is something that you do not want to consider. And I'll cover some alternatives in just a little bit. How are we doing on time? All right. Okay. So last 2 sections, I'm going to talk about how to get information, because warnings literally will save your life. That farmer, if in that storm we saw in Keister that developed that tornado so rapidly, that farmer likely could have been out working in a field and didn't have a view of it. They could have been in the house and had no idea that that was going on. So getting a warning can be quite critical. Don't assume that everything is fine just because it looks okay from one of the views out of your windows. So you don't know necessarily what's going on near you or what's coming your way. Warnings literally mean the difference between life and death. And so being able to get warnings, and especially making sure that you have backup sources of warning in case for some reason this one doesn't reach you, is incredibly important. So here's where you can get some great information. There's a lot of sources on the internet, and really choosing one that works for you is great and that you can trust. Same thing for warnings. But the official source is the National Weather Service forecast office for your area. And we've provided links along with this presentation for the National Weather Service offices that cover the entire state. On their main pages, they always feature this map, which includes information about where severe weather is either occurring or is predicted to occur based on the coloration of the county that you're in. So in this case, if you were down in Rochester, they have what's called a hazardous weather outlook. And I can easily click either on the county or on the hazard itself, and it will tell me exactly what may be coming my way and what I should plan for. Another thing that they produce, if you happen to use social media in any way, on their Facebook page and on their Twitter page for the forecast office for your area, they produce something called a weather story, which is a really great simple graphic that says, here's what we're going to deal with today. In this case, this was actually for the outbreak last year. I don't know, we've had a couple different Faribault outbreaks recently. So this is 2018, okay, so the previous outbreak. This is showing by the colors that we have a strong tornado potential for later that day. This was actually sent out at 9 o'clock in the morning. And we're really trying to push out information to the public and say, hey, heads up for today. Things look kind of nasty. Make sure that you're paying attention. Unfortunately, most people don't know where to go for this information, or it doesn't get as well shared. But people in this area have a 10%, and that's for every location within this, of seeing severe weather that day. And it's exactly as predicted how this played out. Another source for information similar to that is the National Weather Service's Storm Prediction Center. They put out outlooks, and this is where you can go to see several days in advance what may be coming that day. And they also put out a map which has indications of where the severe weather threat is going to be highest for that day. When you go to the Storm Prediction Center, and link has also been provided for this, understand that when they're talking about day one, and convective outlook is meaning potential for severe storms. Day one is the day that you are currently on. Day two is tomorrow, and so on. So they code it by color into how much danger there is. And if we see a hash mark over an area, it means that any storms that do form here are likely to have giant size hail or very strong long track tornadoes. So this particular area would be our greatest concern for this day. And this is the convective outlook for the Tulsa outbreak. The information that they produce kind of comes in 3 different categories. Can be several days in advance. They may produce a hazardous weather outlook. And that includes a general period of time, a general area, and an idea of what the hazards may be. So as we see this hazardous weather outlook, which is again available on the National Weather Service's page, it'll say we have some hazards coming in today and tonight. This is not for today, this is just an example. That will include thunderstorms, and that the main risk is large hail. So this is a great heads up. This is your keep doing what you're doing, but check in a little bit more often on the forecast to make sure that the hazard has not started to develop and now you need to take some action. A watch will be issued for multiple counties or a portion of the state, but it's, whoops, I just accidentally hit that. It's a much smaller area than what a hazardous weather outlook covers. They're normally for about 4 hours or so as a period of time. So they're also a little bit more exact within their time frame that they cover. And this means that we've moved into a situation where all of the ingredients are coming together, and it looks very likely that at least in some portions, we will see the development of severe weather within the next few hours. So they also tend to cover counties, and they will indicate cities within that area as well. They include severe thunderstorms, and severe thunderstorms, remember, can have incredibly large hail, damaging winds that are tornado strength, etc. So they can be and should be taken just about as seriously as a tornado warning. Obviously, we can have tornado watches if that is the most significant potential that day. Doesn't mean that we won't also get, and probably we will, giant hail and strong gusty winds, and even some flash flooding from these storms. And obviously we have flood watches as well. This is your point to kind of say, all right, I'm going to double check the batteries in the flashlight. I'm maybe going to stay a little closer to home and postpone my errand until later. Or if I do have to go out, I'm going to make sure that I'm keeping an eye on what's going on and remembering where I can go if I'm out to find safety. At the warning point, we are no longer at try to remember where the flashlight is. Think about what you really should bring downstairs with you. Everything should already be ready. You have only potentially a few minutes or less before this weather is going to hit you. You need to grab your cat and your husband and head to the basement, potentially in that order. So there's no more time for delay. Warning means that severe weather has developed and it is either coming into your area very shortly or it's already there. Warnings generally last for 30 minutes or less, and they cover portions of a county and individual cities. And they will often include with them exactly what this warning is for. There is an observed tornado in this one, meaning a tornado has been seen on the ground, and 1-inch hail. So again, it's very critical that you get that warning. On average, now we're able to provide for some people up to 10 minutes of warning prior to the arrival of a tornado. But again, you may be within that initial formation area and you may have 1 minute or less. So do not delay, grab your stuff, head to the basement. Hopefully you already have some stuff there. And I'll talk about alternatives to basements in just a moment. But being able to get that warning, whether you are washing the dishes or out in the garden or asleep, especially, is very important. So relying on a single source for any warning is not a good idea. Make sure that you have backups. Your life literally depends on it. So find a couple different sources that are trusted by you that will provide quick, accurate information that you can actually act on. For those of us with smartphones, you may have already received on occasion a strange text with a very odd sound and vibration, and it's intended to be completely unique. You can't buy the sound, you can't set that vibration, because it wants you to go, what on earth is going on with my phone? And look at it. So these are called wireless emergency alerts, and they are by far the fastest and most effective source of warning. So if you have a smartphone and you have opted out of receiving these, know that you are missing probably the best life-saving warning that is out there. The minute that the National Weather Service enters that warning, it is sent out to all the cell towers that then ping any phone that's within that cell tower's range, which means that also this will alert you while you're driving, if you drive into an area, etc., which is invaluable. Because when you're in your car, if you're not listening to broadcast radio that decides it's going to cover the weather for that period of time, you're not going to get any warning. You have no idea what you're heading into. You can't hear the sirens in your car. So a great source. Another source is a NOAA weather radio. These are actually fairly inexpensive, $20 to $30 at your local big box store. And like the wireless emergency alerts, they will immediately begin sounding a tone. And what's nice about them is that they actually will then have a voice that will tell you the National Weather Service has issued a tornado warning for Ramsey County. And you can actually grab these. They have a battery backup and as well as plug in. You can take them down to the basement with you, and then you have a good source for this storm as it develops. Has the warning been extended? Has the tornado passed? And that's really important for knowing when it's safe to come back out again. Obviously, your local weather channel or any other service that you have going on to any of the KSTP, KMSP, etc. You can sign up for an app that'll send out stuff, or, you know, if you watch TV fairly often, know that there will be the emergency alert that comes across the bottom. But this is voluntary by stations, and many cable stations do not cover this. Also, the weather may actually disrupt your receiving that on the TV, especially if you have Dish network. So I personally like to use an app for a backup. I use the Red Cross's emergency app. It will warn, I can actually choose which things that I want to get warned about, whether I don't want to get warned about special marine warnings, or I do go out on a boat often and I want to know that. You can tell it which area you want to cover, saying I want any warning within this period or this area. And I actually also have it covering my mom's house so that I know when she has a warning for her location. And last on this list is the sirens. So sirens are a fabulous way to warn people who are outside and have no other source of information that there is some danger in the area and they need to immediately get inside and get information. They are one of the slowest things to sound. It takes several steps when a warning is issued before we get to the siren sounding. They tell you nothing about what the danger is. We could have a tornado coming in, or actually there could be a hazardous material spill that occurred and we're trying to get people out of the park and into buildings. So what you do because of these sirens sounding can vary. We may want you to go to a high room rather than all the way down to the basement as a knee jerk to these. They also are not intended to be heard inside. If you happen to be in a place where you can hear those sirens inside, then they can serve as that backup for you. But they are only intended to warn people who are outside. They sound for 3 minutes and that's it. Then they automatically turn off to preserve their batteries. But a lot of people think that because the sirens are no longer sounding, the danger has gone. And there is never, ever an all clear. Sirens sounding mean there's a danger. An additional siren sounding means there's another danger. They do not tell you when there's no danger. They only tell you when there is an active danger in the area. So this should be your very backup warning source and not your primary. How are we doing on time? Patty, do you have?
Karma, we only have a few more minutes remaining.
Perfect. This part, this is our end. And I'm going to cover a little bit about safety right in here, but we'll go through most of this fairly quickly. Remember that lightning can strike from up to 20 miles away from the storm. So there could be a storm over the trees that you don't even know is there, and it can kill you with its lightning. The sound of thunder is not, we should think about going inside in just a little bit. It's you are now within the strike zone of this storm based on the speed of sound. If you can hear the thunder, the storm is close enough to kill you, time to go inside. And I apologize, sometimes I go a little long on some parts. So we've covered this. Don't worry about you need to be in this position or not under a tree, go inside. Inside your car is okay, actually for lightning, but inside a building, that's really the only way you're going to be safe. Flash flooding is a very serious and very deadly issue. And when flash flood warnings occur, oh, I'm sorry, this is not very visible. You can have little to no warning. And in these cases, we want you to get to high ground as quickly as possible. So do pay attention to flash flood warnings. They are very, very dangerous. And unfortunately, one of the ways that they kill is less by surprising people and more by them driving into the water. There is never a point when you should see if your car can also double as a boat. Okay, most people do die in their cars in flash floods. Occasionally they do get surprised by the storm, and in general, they can see the water and they're choosing to drive into it. Nothing on the end of this drive is worth your risking your life. Please go around. Hail can be falling at 100 miles per hour, and it can be up to 7 inches in diameter. It's very, very solid, and obviously hail falling that's that large can kill. So please be very careful with hail. Remember that it gets bigger as we go through the storm, so do not go outside and grab hail to take pictures of until it is passed. When we're talking about being in a car and dealing with hail, your best solution is to get off the road. We'll talk about underpasses in just a second. I don't recommend them even for a hailstorm because they are so incredibly dangerous in tornadoes. You need to get off the road. If you can, get underneath a gas station canopy, etc. But unfortunately, you're going to have to rely on your insurance and get off the road. Straight line winds from a storm can be up to 110 miles per hour or basically tornado strength and can be very damaging. Unfortunately, there's no way for us to know when a straight line wind is coming. There's no kind of initial warning. So remember that even a thunderstorm that's barely severe can have extremely damaging winds. And even severe thunderstorms are not the time for you to be upstairs looking out the window at the storm coming in. And I'm going to skip this because of time, but it just shows a downdraft going through. And then the other thing is the hazards left behind after the storm moves through. So you have broken glass, you have down power lines, everything is sharp, everything is contaminated, hazardous materials are mixed together. Every single power line that you see, you should consider to be live. Don't take any chances with it. And be very careful when trying to get out of an area like this. Okay, where to go? So whether you're in a house or an apartment, we'll talk about mobile homes in just a second, what the rule that you want to follow is like baseball. Stay low and inside. Being near any outside wall or being near any upper floor puts you in additional danger. So you want to try to get as to the interior of that building as possible and as low down as you can get. If there is no basement, using an interior room within the center of the home, especially small ones like bathrooms, hallways, etc., that additional structure around you will help to prevent the flying debris and any of the falling debris that happens when a tornado hits your house. Stay away from outside walls, even in your basement. Going to the southwest corner of your basement, and that's actually where the tornado is most likely to hit first, because that's how they travel to the northeast. You want to be in the center of your basement, underneath the big beam, or in any small room that's down there. If you live in an apartment, getting to the interior rather than the exterior portion of the apartment, if there's an interior hallway, an elevator, a stairwell, etc., that's where you're going to be more safe. If you have the ability to go down within that apartment building, especially if there's like an underground garage, that is going to be the safest place. But either way, if you're on upper floors, try to get down as far as you can and then into some central space. And then mobile homes are unfortunately, they actually can be completely destroyed in even a very weak tornado or a strong thunderstorm. They are extremely vulnerable. And unfortunately, though Minnesota statute requires mobile home parks to have a shelter, that shelter does not have to be unlocked, nor does it have to be able to fit all of the residents of the mobile home park. So please make sure that you are paying extra attention to the weather coming in, because you will need the time to see if you can get into the shelter or if there's somewhere else that you can go. But you do not ever want to stay in a mobile home for any storm with high winds or a tornado. Extremely dangerous. And we'll talk about emergency kits after this, but there's a couple different things to make sure that you have wherever in your house you have designated as your storm area. And you can have something that you have to grab it and take with you to the apartment's lower floors, or something that's already in place in your basement. But basically, we're asking you to be prepared to survive for a period of time down there, especially if the storm does damage your house and you are trapped. It may be several days before we have enough responders who have gone through and are able to get to you. So be prepared to be there for a bit. This information is going to be provided after as well. And then kind of wrapping things up as far as driving, you do not want to be in the car. The best way is to know the forecast and know that there's a warning and not be driving into that area in the first place. If that was not possible and you do see a storm or especially a tornado ahead of you, you need to go turn at a right angle and get away from its path. Do not ever try to outrun a tornado. Not only do they change direction, but they're going at 60 miles per hour, whether there's traffic or obstructions or not. So they will catch you. Underpasses are extremely dangerous. They actually magnify the storm's winds and they're smooth, and so they just suck you right out of there. Do not park, do not take shelter underneath an overpass. If you have no choice, there's no building for you to get to, there's no road that you can use to drive away from this, and it's coming towards you, then you should consider getting out of your car, getting away from it because it's going to be debris, and getting into whatever low spot on the side of the road is near you, including ditches. But unfortunately, you need to keep in mind that you can only shelter there for a short period of time, because ditches are where the heavy rains coming from this storm are going to collect. And so you've gone from being safe from the tornado to now being in danger from the waters and potentially even drowning. So there's no good choices for being in a car in a tornado. The best thing to do is to get to a building or get out of that area. Again, already talked about overpasses, extremely dangerous, and stopping underneath them means that we can't get ambulances through. People who are also having trouble seeing are going to slam right into you. And overpasses are, again, where floodwaters tend to congregate. So it's extremely dangerous. I'm not going to cover the specifics, but as in, we have quite a few records where people who were in the overpasses died who didn't have to. Remember to practice your plans, especially during tornado drill day, where the sirens sound, as well as the NOAA weather radio will go off twice a day, so you can practice at home, at work, etc. Practice makes perfect. A plan is just a plan until you've practiced it. Then it becomes a capability. And knowing how long it takes you to grab your cat and your husband and hit the basement will really help you be more efficient and safer in the future. And my goodness, that's it. I'm done.
Karma, thank you so much for your presentation today. Just fascinating information, all of it. And I want to apologize for many of the participants who joined. I just learned that there must have been a glitch with the time as it showed up on people's calendars. This session began at 12 o'clock. So my apologies for that oversight. The session was recorded, so we will definitely be sending out that link to all of you. I want to thank all of you and let you know that for attending this presentation, everyone is going to be receiving an AARP disaster bag, which contains a lot of very helpful and useful information. We will also include the information contained in Karma's presentation earlier today. And we will again be sending out the link to the presentation. So my apologies. Karma, fascinating information, and I hope that information will help everyone respond to and react should we be faced in an emergency situation. So I think that concludes our presentation. We've gone slightly over the hour mark. So
certainly, if there are any questions as well, whether you send them to the AARP group who helped to organize this, or send them to me directly through Ramsey County Emergency Management, I'm more than happy to provide answers as best as I can, or options for unique situations. Or if you are interested in having us come and talk about a disaster preparedness subject, we are happy to help.
Okay, great. Thank you for that, Karma. I will be sending, as I said before, I will be sending out information to all of you. You can respond to me, and I will in turn forward any questions along to Karma directly. So Thank you for joining. I appreciate it very much. Have a good day.
Thanks,
Thank
Karma.
you. Thank you.
Thanks, Karma.